Welcome everyone to Rendezvous with Racconti.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to discuss on a very interesting topic, which is architectural time travel from past to present to future. Let's keep it candid and have interesting answers that we can talk about and take forward as takeaways.
So when you're saying time travel, are you talking about a Doctor Who kind of TARDIS situation where you can
Totally. Imagine yourself being in a capsule and being transported, those metaverses that you see in movies.
Right.
You switch from one verse to the other. Imagine yourself doing that. And but take a step back before you enter the capsule and let's remind each other that we had the luxury of sitting for many hours during architectural schools, and we were thinking of what these historical marvels looked like and why they were made and how they were made. And now in our current situation, we don't get to do that. So hence, you have to imagine being in the capsule and going back to time and maybe talking about what did you like and did not like, and if there is any historical marvel that you feel kind of relates to you in a much deeper way than just an architectural entity. Let's talk about those elements. So what would be that particular monument or era that you would like to go back and think that if I was standing in front of this building or this structure and would be looking at how it is being made or how it was being made, so what would that be?
I'll start.
Yeah, please.
I like this Leaning Tower of Pisa. If I would be at that era, that building will not be the tilted one. It would be the straight one.
The funny thing about this, of course, it's tilted. It's man-made tilted. And just recently, I wouldn't say recently, but almost a decade back, not as old as this Pisa is, RMJM did a building, and this was the Capitol Gate, right? This was the Capitol Gate. And RMJM is a renowned firm. All respects to all the architects, Pisa wala architect bhi and even RMJM. But they intentionally made this building tilted, and it's almost 4 times tilted than Pisa. Of course, it has its own relevance and a context, and but it's so much interesting to see that people do not want to keep their building straight anymore. It's always there is some twist or turn that they always try to bring in.
It's like that caption that used to be "Normal is boring."
Normal is boring.
Normal is boring. So.
Like Frank Gehry, who deliberately makes everything completely tailor for no reason.
Yeah. Like
even Zaha.
Yeah.
But Zaha Hadid is more curvaceous, I'd say, in her design expression.
I hardly remember any straight building I don't think there's any straight building.
Not at all.
On principle.
On principle, perfect.
So what would be really cool would be to ask if you could put Zaha Hadid or Frank Gehry into a capsule and send them back to the Kailashnath temple and see if they could figure that out. Because there was a piece of architecture done in ancient India so many decades, centuries
and
ago,
let them work with mud.
Where they worked from the top down and they carved out of a piece of stone. It was not positive architecture, what we call it was negative architecture.
Rock cut,
and it was a solid rock, and they knew exactly which parts to chip away. I don't know if even a Zaha Hadid's AI knows how to do that even today.
And that's very interesting because it's almost like the way 3D printing works, but backwards.
But backwards,
where you
right?
Modeled it out beforehand, and then you're sort of removing the negative space.
But I would think a 3D printer would struggle to make that in a negative, if we gave it negative information and to try and figure that out.
But interestingly, so there is a Japanese technique called Sugite. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. It may just sound something different back in Japan. But Sugite is where the joinery details are such that you do not use any nails or screws. And all the wooden structure is actually combined together. That kind of envisioning, even before carving those two members together to create that kind of a complex joinery. Absolutely. If they could imagine, then I wonder. So in fact, for that matter, Gaudi or Duomo in Milan.
Absolutely.
Look at those structures. They did not have 3D printers or 3D visualizing softwares, but they eventually managed to do.
I mean,
such
I would
beautiful
go back
things.
when Notre Dame was getting built and see exactly what was happening, because definitely they did not have any 3D printing and any technology where they could actually visualize. Today we are sitting in an era where we have VR and we can visualize what the building will look like. But those days, I think there was no provision like that. So I would really want to go back to that era and witness how it happened.
And feel
So would you
completely
say that
inadequate.
you're going to take the 3D modeling machine
Probably,
to them and then maybe
probably,
just send-
and that could maybe make the entire process of the building, even shorter in terms of getting built. They wouldn't have taken so many years to sort of build that thing. Possibly, I don't know. It could be quicker, maybe.
But I think in those days, those kinds of structures were multi-generational projects.
Absolutely, I agree.
Right. Where I often wonder is that what would the role of the architect be? Because if you're having to create something over 3 or 4 or 5 generations, that means it's not one architect, it's several architects, maybe from the same lineage, all discussing things over family dinners and passing on the knowledge one generation to the next. So there's a continuum of thought there, which is very interesting.
So let's say that we have to bring back an architect or a designer. So say, if you go back, there weren't any architects at that point. They were just
Master craftsmen.
Master craftsmen. That's exactly what they were. And if you were to bring back one person and ask them to make, let's say, a stadium in Beijing, the Nest, who would that be?
George Nakashima.
And why?
Definitely.
Never heard about this.
So George Nakashima, he built the Golconda Ashram at Pondicherry, which is the first modernist building in India. So what he did is he brought what you were talking about, Japanese detailing in terms of joinery, and applied it to reinforced concrete, and created the first building in India of that level of detailing using those materials back in 1940 something. So yes, George Nakashima would do a very interesting take on the Beijing Stadium.
And any other technique that you would want to bring back from the old to the new? Or it could be vice versa. You could just say that. Of course, we've talked about the 3D machine, but anything else that you think
I like the
we're
technique
better
of
at?
Egyptian architecture. They were building the triangles, the most stable form. And the Roman architecture is also one of the same thing. They were building the big, huge structures.
It would be so cool to put the architects of the Roman baths together with the architects who made stepwells in India or Baolis in India and see what they came up with if they exchanged notes.
Yeah,
You know,
Baolis have been a
The
phenomenal.
Baolis are
in general.
phenomenal pieces
Yeah,
of architecture, and before 3D printing, before mathematical computing with computers and all of that, they're completely insane. I mean, we've tried to do paper cutting to do the Baoli. My husband does these paper cards with those, and just trying to work out the mathematics to do that for like let's say 25 steps is insane. And just imagine how they used to do it.
In addition to what you're saying and linking it to the pyramids in Egypt, is the materials involved itself, where you've got these megalithic blocks of stone, and then how are these people chiseling it,
Absolutely,
transporting
yeah.
it, lifting it, hoisting it, placing it, joinery details. It was really something else with technologies that I don't think we can replicate in this day and age, because we have cranes, we have various kinds of mechanical devices, but to do it without the machinery is something.
You need lots
We
of
know
slaves.
we're sending Ranjeet to
A
Cairo.
lot of slaves.
And we're sending Ranjeet to Cairo then.
Yeah,
Time
absolutely.
travel to
With a
Cairo.
slave whip.
Yes, we need slaves. I hope it's not Taj Mahal for some reason.
Oh yeah, but that's an urban myth. I don't think they actually cut off the hands of those workers. I think that
I
is
think
one
they were
of-
just trying to scare them away.
probably,
That's to
these.
popularize
And
the
not,
building.
yeah, also.
Yes.
Those were the tactics of
So narrative is
that era.
important, equally important.
Sorry?
History is written by the victors.
Yeah.
Correct, exactly.
So there has to be a storytelling to make it famous
Yeah,
to the generations, next generations.
yeah.
And coming back to the previous question, I would, on a serious note, I really want to revisit Bauhaus movement. I believe I'm a strong believer in that. And when the art, sculpturist, every form of art or architecture, they club together and make buildings to come out from that the previous material possession kind of a thing. Every building was supposed to be like a matter of victory or a symbol of victory. And they were to rule the entire nation. But Bauhaus was a moment I strictly believe that they break the monotony of what we have done in the past, and let's come out with a new, जैसे कहते हैं ना राजा का बेटा राजा नहीं अब. So
Right.
that was the moment.
They were
So
also
they
they were
were
ahead
new.
of their time, but what else? I think since we started to talk about Bauhaus, I think Indus Valley was definitely one of them.
Gothic is also a very interesting thing that way.
I
But those
agree.
were like
Gothic
dominating,
has
yes.
been larger than life.
Absolutely.
And,
Very extravagant.
Did you
Very
guys talk about, since you've been in teaching for some
Yeah.
time, did you how interested were the students to talk about Gothic versus the more successors of the style of
You're
those
right. I
eras,
think
like
somewhere, somewhere they're not so interested because they want to go back. Like I said, they want to go back to the place, look at a monument because it's there in their books and it's been talking about it. But I think the modern buildings is something that really catches them and really attracts them. So.
But still, there is a huge royalty in all those previous buildings.
Yeah, there's a lot of extravagance.
Yes.
I think it's also because students are only interested in things that they think they might be able to use later in
Use
life,
in the-
and they're not
yeah.
going to make a Gothic church ever again, so they're not interested.
I think
in
in
that.
the first few years they kind of are inclined towards understanding that God,
Yeah.
such awe structures are also made, and then later on they realize that what else can they do in their thesis and
yeah. I think it's more that it says that they don't
Yeah.
find direct application for it. But there's, in terms of awe-inspiring architecture, it's not just Gothic churches. There's other. I mean, look at the Great Wall of China. If there's nothing more awe-inspiring than that. And if we were to say, relate that to something that we're doing today, look at the line in Saudi Arabia, which is going to be a Great Wall of Saudi Arabia very soon.
Although they've
So-
reduced the length of the line. apparently.
Hopefully they'll reduce
They
it even
couldn't
more.
acquire the land.
The
Absolutely.
line will be a dot
No,
to
but the
us
great,
very soon.
the Great Wall of China apparently took 2,600 years to make,
Yeah.
which means that it took longer to make the Great Wall of China than Christianity has been in existence. I mean, that's a time
Yeah,
scale
yeah.
to keep in mind.
I would say China is another metaverse in that sense.
Oh, yes.
It's always been like that, even today.
But to your point of academics, right? So European architecture and the various phases that it's gone through in terms of Gothic and Renaissance and
Romanesque,
all these kinds of phases has been very particularly established in the academic discourse. But we are forgetting about things like Angkor Wat, for example, in
Cambodia.
the east, and
Yeah.
you've got the Mayans or the Incas in the west, and you've got so many other cultures, so many other civilizations that have had so many developments in terms of architectural iconographies and styles that I feel like maybe academics is sort of like overlooked sometimes because it's not documented well enough. It's also not been promoted by the people who are the victors of various wars and so forth. So certain cultures seem to be pushing their own agendas in terms of discourse.
That having, while you said that, I also believe that, so just last year I happened to be in Italy and I saw Duomo in Milan, and I've seen a lot of other historic marvels in India as well, but there is something about these large structures which are larger than life, as I mentioned, that you cannot ignore. As much as I totally agree that there's a lot of politics involved and at a global level in terms of geopolitics, where you're being fed what they want to feed you, right? But at the same time, once academically speaking, if the students can actually go and experience these structures while they are doing their 5 years course or whatever the time span is, it would be phenomenal to understand why and why not they have been there. While parallelly, they should also go to smaller vernacular areas and should be able to understand what else was parallelly happening, just as you mentioned. So like medieval age in Europe was something, while medieval age was also here in India.
Absolutely.
And some Mughals and Indo-Islamic architecture was being born here at the same
I
time.
think
But
initially we're not able to understand the verticals that were happening. There were movements happening parallelly across the world.
right.
So only after a few years we try and connect these dots and understand what exactly was happening and looking at the larger picture,
And it's so much easier today to understand the similarities,
Absolutely.
right? The same way as we can understand similarities in mythologies now. We understand, like, the first time I went to Naples and I walked through one of their poorer neighborhoods, it felt like you're walking through Daryaganj. Same kapde hanging on lines outside, and you know, the house is so close together. You can sort of spit from your balcony into your neighbor's balcony, and it's probably also the same level of economic strata that's living there.
Actually, what you're saying is interesting because there's this concept of collective consciousness.
Yeah.
Where the whole species is going through developments at a similar pace, at a similar acceleration.
Yeah.
In fact, Joseph Campbell, he wrote this book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces, where he was basically saying that all human stories are basically one story.
Yeah.
It's the journey of the hero, so to speak, whether it's your Ramayana, Mahabharata, or your Bible or whatnot, even the Matrix movies or the Lord of the Rings and so forth. There's all one kind of narrative that's happening. And in design, well, design is narratives, right? It's essentially you're talking about expressions through space. Those are expressions through literary mediums.
Yeah.
But yes, human beings have this way of echoing and resonating.
Which is why, more than just looking at monuments and cities, what is more fascinating is if you just take in those days before GPS, just took a city map and started walking through cities. So I used to at one point of time in my office have city maps of my favorite cities, and all my favorite cities were cities that you could walk in. So walking cities there's a whole different side of a city that you see when you're walking it. You know, the first time I went to Paris, I went with my parents as a privileged kid, and we did the metros and the cabs and all of that. And then when I went as a student, I walked everywhere because I couldn't afford to do anything else.
It's a totally different
And you
experience,
just realize how
Different
things are
experience.
connected to each other. What is in an axis of what is, how you realize how close some things are to each other when you don't take the metro to them, and you just realize it takes just that much time to just walk across.
So which city would you now, or which city are you planning to
walk?
go now?
Would you walk?
Well, I mean, I don't know about do over, but I think Rome is my favorite walking city. So I did it. I've done Rome multiple times. I've done it as the first time I did it, and then I did it after Angels and Demons came out. So I did the whole Angels and Demons walk of running from here to the next place, and then solving the clue and running from there to the next place. So I
Any
think
Indian city that you can think of, which is
which is a
interesting
walking
enough?
city.
Especially in a better climate.
Delhi would have been a walking city if it was not for this weather.
And there are a lot of
Yeah.
those historical walks, but then
I mean, I'm a complete Delhi wala at heart, and I can do those historical walks if you want to do them, but it's just impossible. It's not just the weather, it's just that if you're not looking at the sidewalk, you will bang into a pillar or fall into a manhole. Our cities in India are not designed for people to walk in. They're just not. There are those
okay, I'll
tactile sidewalks
rephrase
in
this.
which
Which city do you think as an architect you would like to improve in India?
Delhi.
So you can walk.
Delhi.
Delhi is like it's the most obvious, I believe. Okay, what about someone else?
Jaipur is also a nice city to walk, I believe.
Jaisalmer.
Lot of places, lot of forts and those things are there. And every time whenever I go, I walk, I always find something new there.
To shop?
As an architect, not for the shop, as a buildings, for the buildings.
Yeah.
Jodhpur maybe.
Jodhpur is also one of the best
Jodhpur is
cities.
one place where you can
Udaipur,
walk and-
Jodhpur.
Udaipur is very
It gives
walkable.
you,
Udaipur.
Udaipur is very walkable.
So the
Again,
moment-
narrow streets, shaded, so it's easy to walk in
So
the
when
old
we
town.
walk, our perception of landmark changes. So if you are
Yeah.
walking on a maybe if you'll take a cab, your landmark would be different. You have to take right from that kind of a building. The moment you walk, you started observing what kind of a pedestrian pattern we have, what kind of a flora fauna we have. Even you will recall that ferry wala was sitting here and that we have to take left from.
Yeah.
So perception and the pace.
London is a city like that.
Yes.
Because now with all its new one ways and all of that, whether you so when I went as a student to London, I had a friend who had been there for a few years, and every time I would ask her, I have to go to this place tomorrow, she would give me an answer of half an hour. And I told her, you don't even listen to what I'm saying, you just say half an hour for everything. She says it takes half an hour to get anywhere in London. Either you take the tube, or you take the bus, or you walk, or you do a combination of them. It will take you half an hour to get there.
I think India is heavily under the influence of ideas of modernism, like Chandigarh designed by Le Corbusier, was based on his Radiant City, and Corbusier was looking very specifically at automobile cities, where they were looking at how does a car integrate with the urban environment. And therefore we've kind of like let go of the pedestrian concern, and frankly speaking, even cyclists. Cyclists in India are a big part of our traffic, but we don't really factor them in. So we went to Chandigarh recently, and it's got lovely cycle paths, and it's got very nicely done urban planning. But I dare say that the walkability of it, like you're pointing out, is a little bit stark, harsh, so to speak. The distances are unmanageable, if you will. But in India, one city that you could walk around in very well is Bombay. And even I'd say Lutyens Delhi, because the British had a way of designing cities that were quite walkable. Their sense of the sidewalk was actually quite present. And their civic sense, the municipal systems that they put in place have guided us.
I think it also has to do
and
with
the trees.
It's the trees.
Absolutely.
The tree is more than anything.
And
yes, that is what actually, that's the medium.
Yes.
Yeah.
But having said that, I also feel that proximity to the functional centers has to be taken care of as well.
Yes.
Bombay, I'm not very familiar with the city. It so happens I've never been there. Crazy.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes, but of course I know about Bombay otherwise. Yes, the God destined it.
Oh, you'd love South Bombay.
Yeah.
Fort area is
But
beautiful.
the proximity to city center or to the residential area or to the commercial setup, if that is well
Also
planned,
getting
then I think
lost
we are
and
all
blurred,
almost
isn't
there.
it? Now all our cities are multinodal. There's no one city center anymore. It used to be, but now barely any city has one city center. They've got multiple.
So why we were discussing
functions.
about Rajasthan cities mostly because those are radial. I mean, still you can figure out that kind of a pattern that it has been grown around the mahal or the fort which we are talking about.
So talking about Jaisalmer, I mean we did talk about Jaisalmer. Talking about Jaisalmer, I'm wondering, what if we were to convert it into a futuristic city? What would you retain and what would you let go of?
It would be like Dune. All the sand.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm in love with Jaisalmer stone, no doubt. I would really love to. I mean, whatever, if we are going for multi-storing high-rise, just don't get rid of the Jaisalmer. That's the DNA of that space.
So combine that with modern technology and build something.
Obviously, we can't have glass there, but yes, we can look for another alternate material, sustainable materials there. But maybe we can have, we can get inspired from Hawa Mahal, that kind of stuff. We can go for, we can have a skeleton in steel and the skin in Jaisalmer again. That could be, a perfect amalgamation.
All perforated, so well ventilated.
So yes, that could be it. But Jaisalmer, yes, don't go away with the Jaisalmer stone, for sure.
You keep the character in place, right?
Otherwise, that won't feel like Jaisalmer then. It will be like any other modern city.
What about London? You did mention London.
What about
London has such heritage, such strong heritage there. What if we were to convert it into a futuristic city?
It's getting converted slowly. There are parts of London which are more futuristic than others, but I would still like to believe that a Notting Hill will stay, and the old parts
Westminster
of, let's say,
Abbey.
The South Bank. So the South Bank is completely new now. The South Bank, every single building on the South Bank has been redone, and it's been done as a fantastic sort of urban space where they've sort of got people and activities interacting with the river. But there's still parts of London which are the same old, where it doesn't surprise you if you see a policeman on a horseback.
So there is a nice blend of old and new.
Same with Barcelona, I would say.
Yes.
Again, Barcelona is a city which is like Chandigarh placed next to like an old, the Gothic quarters. So it's got the gridded city and it's got the Gothic quarters, and there's this diagonale going through, and that's Barcelona, and it works really well.
Figured out how to survive together, right?
Yeah.
I had the privilege of growing up in Madrid when I was a child. So yes, my father was posted over there, and I noticed that the layers of the city were just so diverse and so stark and so vividly contrasting. And what I wonder is, when we say how to make a place futuristic, is what is our definition of futurism itself?
Yeah.
Because there's an antiquated notion that futurism means high tech. But I think that the future is about biomimicry, where we're looking at natural systems, ecological systems, and how to sort of integrate those kinds of ecologies with our urban fabric in such a way that it permeates right to the building scale and right down to the materials and the detailing, where we're literally responding to nature by imitation.
Yeah,
That's very
it's very
interesting, and a lot of people are
the
experimenting
Japanese
these
architects, Kenzo Tange and Tadao Ando, all of these people did a lot of that. They did these futuristic buildings which had trees and which had grass on all levels, and that was the first time before we had green wall
so they were ahead of the
terminology.
time.
Metabolic
Yeah.
buildings, they had
They
buildings
were
that could grow,
breathing
buildings that
buildings,
could
yeah.
replicate.
I
Yes.
agree with him, because I think the future is not necessarily Hong Kong. The future
Right,
could be,
right.
the future should be green, not orange.
As much as I did not want to bring sustainability, but having said that, yes, of course, that is the end product we're all looking at, right?
We have no future if there's no sustainability.
In fact, Bosco Verticale, that building itself, it's a simple building, multiple stories, but they've just integrated green so beautifully that it actually is a very sustainable, template, so to say.
Singapore is a very good example of that kind of
The
development,
jewel, yes.
which is infrastructure heavy, yes, capital investment heavy, yes, but looking at taking advantage of natural systems, where, for example, they've got district cooling, they've got air conditioning systems that are way deep below the ground level that are cooling multiple structures at the same time from a centralized location. So if air conditioning, for example, is being solved using geology as a basis for cooling, I think that's very advanced.
Dubai is also doing very good. The kind of buildings they are coming up with right now is amazing.
Yes.
Means they are beating the whole world, I believe.
But Dubai,
The
I'd
kind of
say,
parametric buildings they are introducing, the
But-
kind of vertical gardens, buildings, they are vertical forest, I can say.
Right.
They are creating. It's marvelous.
correct me if I'm wrong, but Dubai strikes me as a sort of very artificial place in the sense that it's a desert. Nothing should be there. However, artificially, we've created something because we've injected a lot of resources. And I don't know, is that sustainable? What would you think?
Maybe that will not be a sustainable, but they are creating the next level architecture country.
Okay, so in terms of cutting edge design.
I think at least they're experimenting with things, and as much as
They are the only one who are doing such level of experiments, right?
Now we can call it a laboratory then.
yes,
Laboratory.
totally. And there's so much to learn from that. The waterfront,
Yeah, recently
the island
they faced the
extension.
artificial rain problem also.
So
No,
speaking,
they're a desert,
Last
but they're
month.
also a port, so you have to remember that. It's a desert, but it's also got the sea.
So speaking of a laboratory, that's a very interesting word. So my partner and I, we met at Auroville. And Auroville is considered to be a laboratory in terms of human unity and consciousness. And that again, like Dubai, is an artificial city because it was a barren land, and first what they did afforestation. They grew a lot of trees and whatnot, creating a canopy. And then now they've created this whole developmental system. So yes, experimentation is important, for sure. And you need these laboratory-like situations to experiment in, absolutely.
The kind of parametric structures, I recently saw a few things on the net basically. Those things were amazing. Even I have not seen anywhere throughout the world. Nobody is doing such things. Their government is so supportive. They are ready to create such kind of structures.
Yeah, exactly. Funding.
Where's the money coming from?
Nobody asks these questions, they just have it.
So today if I tell my client, let's experiment, he'll be like, oh, no, let me go somewhere else. Experiment is like one tricky word.
Right. But isn't experimentation fundamental to the design process?
It is, but when it comes to funding, I think a lot of it has to come from the client side also.
I think it's also the internal process more than the external client and designer relationship. You don't bring that out. You usually don't bring that out. It's more internal process, either in office at the back end or at a personal level. And we all keep experimenting that way. We keep trying new ideas to make our designs more progressive or match with the new technology, the new materials that are in place. So these self-healing products that are in market these days, some of them are the most basic ones like epoxy and PU, come on, they're self-healing. And then there were the ones which Romans used, like Roman concrete for that matter, or we've also used some version of it, like lime, mixing lime with ashes and all of that.
So speaking of experimentation, our very first project was a rammed earth structure. So speaking about experimentation, the first project we did as a design firm was a rammed earth farmhouse. It was located just outside of Bombay in a very rural area, so we were working with farmers, villagers. And they'd never seen rammed earth technology before, where you're making a single panel of 8 feet by 8 feet out of earth without any reinforcement, no mortar, nothing. So the whole village decided to come during the monsoon and stand in front of the building to watch to see it wash away. They were hoping it would wash away. No such luck. But yes, experimentation is vital. And yes, the clients do have to support it. And that's how the profession, I say, evolves in its own.
Yeah, but I think what she said was also very valid, that it can happen internally rather than just throwing it on the client's plate saying that we are experimenting.
Through prototyping.
Yeah, through prototyping.
Yeah. That can happen.
Perfect. So, if you were given a chance, each one of you, and you were supposed to bring back a style, it could be Western architectural style or Indian, what would that be, and what kind of typology, what kind of building would you like to bring in? I mean, what kind of building would you choose to get that style in?
I would like to introduce to work for Indian architecture only.
Okay, that's interesting.
Because I'm doing a lot of projects which are basically influenced by Indian architecture. I'm doing a lot of retail outlets, studios, where we are using all those things. So, and we are very much inspired with those things. I will definitely like to go for that only. And our Indian architecture is very rich and very different.
So any specific era or any specific style, maybe Mughal,
Like
maybe
the
Rajputana?
Rajasthan architecture. I like the most.
All the jalis and the
Yes.
and the
For me
jharokas,
also,
yeah.
I
Very
think Rajasthan, I love the patterns and the textures and the stone carving that they do. I think their patterns are completely amazing. And we definitely, I would love to use them in my projects, and I have been using them also, trying to use them.
What about Mughal architecture? I find it very intriguing. I would definitely like to bring in a few elements. It's a very beautiful fusion of Indian and
It also it has fantastic symmetry and axis, which is something which is very characteristic of Mughal architecture, and the material. Just the beauty of marble and of sandstone. The way Mughal architecture used stone, I think nobody has used it before. It was just tremendous. The other one which I would really look at is coastal architecture in India, because there's something about that which is more minimalist. It's more site specific, and in terms of responsiveness to the environment, I think it's not excessive. So when we talk about Rajput architecture, Mughal architecture, we're talking again of architecture of the state, of the kings. Whereas when we talk about regional architecture, we're talking about architecture of the people, which is always more efficient in terms of energy, in terms of money, in terms of climate, in terms of sustainability.
it becomes more vernacular and hence,
It's more vernacular, and also it's always a little lighter. It does away with a lot of the ornamentation and the heavy elements, and it's what you need.
and it's trending these days.
Trending these days, yes. So it's whether it's Balinese architecture or whether it's
Persian.
Goan architecture, it's so much of these sort of open bungalow villa type places, and they do have a tremendous sense of relationship with nature, with the outside, which is great. Which is something which we feel, especially post-COVID, a lot of people looking for. People who are building independent houses
I think they
do
found
want that nature coming into their house and their house sort of flowing into
They
that.
found a midway between Spanish and Goan, in some way, and it's it's
Styles
a
are
beautiful
more
fusion.
related to aesthetics, I believe. So I think let's have a fusion of styles together. So what we have learned over years, that it's all about your lifestyle, the change in the pattern, the way people are growing, the way our demands are growing. I think creating a fusion around that, and incorporating those sensibilities from all the styles together could be a better thing. Let's not stick to one side of the style or one side of this. Let's not call it a style. It's just
It's
about the sensibility.
contemporary, as so to say, right?
The contemporary
You'll
is
have to
another
put
word,
it
yes.
in you'll have to box it in some
That
way.
is
It's a
basically
demand of the
inspiration.
time.
Personally, I am very fond of Art Deco. I feel that Art Deco is a design style that has a very unique quality. It is referencing the machine age, yet at the same time it's got a lot of natural features and motifs in it. And in terms of the time in which it was emerging, it was just after the wars or during the wars, where there was a lot of conflict, a lot of strife in the planet, and the human population was going through a lot of transition. And this design style that came out then permeated everywhere. It's in Bombay, it's all over Fort Bombay, it's in Calcutta as well. Art Deco is all over the place. In fact, our gracious hosts, Racconti, have also got a lovely Art Deco collection upstairs. And I think that a revival of the Art Deco philosophy is going to be very interesting for
It's
the design
already
world.
there.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
already there. So I have a few architects. I have a few names here, popular, famous architects that we all hopefully know, and you'll get to choose one of them. No questions asked why, but the idea is to understand what style are you inclined to.
Okay.
All right. So let's start with you. I'll keep repeating if need be. Uniifyy. He belongs to the era where he was focused on straight lines, very minimalistic kind of architect.
I would love to follow Lee Corbusier in that case, out of the four that you have mentioned.
All right. What about you, Priyanka?
Gaudi.
I resonate with that.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. What about you, Pooja?
Why Gaudi? I mean, I just really want to ask.
I
why
think Gaudi, because Gaudi was very organic. Gaudi has done a lot of a range of things. It's not just the incomplete church.
What about? Is it about the ornamentation that he?
It's about the way
The
he
jewelry
treated
ornamentation?
concrete. No
And
one
also-
treated concrete like that before he did.
And I think the passion with which he made it happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
The futuristic vision that he had for that structure.
Yeah.
The larger than life, the sheer scale of all these, the way he built it. I think the building can encompass 12,000 people, or maybe 14,000 people. I don't remember that. But the idea of creating a structure that large and making sure that each and every person who experiences it is able to be in awe, is able to appreciate what he has done.
I see a lot of synergy between what Antonio Gaudi was doing and what Salvador Dali was doing.
Yes.
Because in their respective
Yes.
domains, because they were challenging the notions of perception
Yes.
per se.
And also fluidity. They were challenging the three dimensions in which we saw everything. They wanted to wrap things around.
In
they wanted
fact,
to play with their material.
I dare say both Gaudi and Dali were very psychedelic in their works.
I think all of
maybe,
these people
yeah.
have to be.
Yes.
The ones who are able to do this.
Yes.
Nobody will talk about you if you are not psychedelic.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And it's not just Gaudi's big work. It's also, even Casamia and the
Smaller
smaller
ones.
buildings.
Yes.
There is a certain, craftsmanship in his work, which is there in a lot of Indian architecture as well. But the way he used concrete to do that craftsmanship was new. So the ability to take a material and use it in a different way, and to be bold enough to, play with texture, to play with form, and to use the fact that concrete is actually literally fluid, and to use the fluidity of that material, I think was very brave, and that was
agree, yeah.
something that people before him had not done.
And it still looks perfect.
Yeah.
It still looks. so
Very
nice.
few people are still willing to take that risk that
Then
he
of
took.
course, that's the design and construction aspect of it. But then when you're talking about the experiential value of it, that when you're an individual who's experiencing these places,
Yeah.
there's a transcendental quality.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
we had coined this term in our firm, we called it entheogenic design, which is basically talking about design works that bring out the divine qualities within you.
Okay.
En within theos, divine, gen, to bring out gen. So entheogenic design is like Antonio Gaudi's, or even for example Salvador Dali's works, which we call psychedelic works, are talking about how can these expressions generate a sort of spiritual experience for you when you're witnessing them or encountering them.
think that also happened in Hindu temple architecture.
Very much
Yeah.
so. Absolutely.
It's so much evident, and these
Yes.
are parallel lives.
Yes.
Again, metaverses practically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know.
Right down to even the pyramids of Egypt.
Yes.
Those are also very transcendental spaces. Those are looking exactly to your alignment with the cosmic nature of
And that is the most stable form.
Yes. Yes. In fact, pyramid means fire in the center.
Yes.
Right. And that means you're talking about literally the soul, the Atman, that's within the self. Right. So, yeah, very fundamentally spiritual concepts being translated into design forms.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to you, Mukesh.
Yes, ma'am. Can you repeat the names?
Of course. I am Pai, Antoni Gaudi, Le Corbusier, and
I like IMPI because I like the building Louvre Paris.
Oh, lovely.
That is basically a blend of modern and the European architecture. That's really great to. I love that building.
did you get a chance to see it?
Yeah. 2-3 times I was there. I have seen the building, and we were talking about Rajasthan, Jaisalmer, how to basically you can redefine those structures. We can blend that modern architecture with the ancient architecture in that way also.
Yeah, in fact, I think Foster's has also done a recent building in New York. I think it's called Hearst Center. Has anyone
Foster
seen
has
it?
done one more
There is a lower
place
structure.
in Milan.
Okay.
Yeah, that Apple store. The
Yeah.
whole area
Yeah.
is in European architecture, and that building is in modern. That glass, big huge glass, is there.
You have to have the right client for it. Like we were talking about experimenting.
Yes.
The client has to come up with that idea. If you come up with that idea, the chances of client being sold on it is quite bleak.
Or you
I
have to
feel.
make the client think that they came up with the
That's
idea.
a longer process then. Fair enough. Few years of that and then you start the project.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyhow, thank you so much. This was very intriguing, and I hope that all of us, went back into the time travel, that space again, and kind of revisited some of our favorite buildings.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again for taking out time and sitting together and discussing this.
Thank you.
Thank
Nikita.
you.
Thanks, Nitya.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
Thank
you
you.
so
Thanks all
much.
of
We
you.
love being part of this entire thing, and you were amazing.
Thank you.
It was a
Alright.
pleasure interacting with all of you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Totally. And it opens up so many, realms and so many topics for discussion. I think I would definitely try and get back to you and talk to you one-on-one on many interesting things that you guys are doing separately as well.